What if everything we believe about human history is completely wrong? What if Antarctica, that forgotten, icy, silent, and seemingly empty continent, holds the oldest, most profound, and most disturbing answers about human true origins? This question may seem absurd at first glance, but the truth is that for years, scientists, explorers, and even governments have avoided talking about certain mysteries hidden beneath kilometers of ice. Mysteries that, if revealed, could forever change our understanding of evolution, civilization, and even who we really are. But before diving deep into this unsettling possibility, let me ask you one more very direct question. Do you really believe that Antarctica is just a frozen desert? Or do you feel deep down that there is something much bigger hidden there? Because when you start to analyze more closely, every scientific discovery, every geological anomaly, every historical record, and even every unexplained military expedition, Antarctica stops looking like just a piece of ice at the edge of the planet. It transforms into a natural vault, a vault that has remained locked for millions of years, protecting secrets that no other place on Earth has managed to preserve. Secrets that may indeed be directly linked to human origins. And this is where the story gets really disturbing. The idea that the answers to who we are may be buried beneath the world's oldest ice isn't just intriguing, it's almost inevitable. After all, Antarctica was not always as we know it today. In ancient times, before total freezing, this continent was covered by dense forests, mighty rivers, and a completely different fauna. Recent studies show that Antarctica was once a fertile place, full of life, a lost paradise that disappeared without leaving a visible trace. But did he really leave no trace? What if there are marks, traces, artifacts, structures, perhaps even signs of ancient civilizations that lived there before the planet changed drastically? What if these civilizations are much older than anything recorded in the history books? What if Antarctica holds fragments of our own lineage, a forgotten chapter that could rewrite everything we understand about human evolution? It may seem like fantasy, crazy theory, or exaggerated speculation, but the number of inexplicable discoveries continues to grow. Gigantic underground caves where the temperature exceeds 20 degrees, old maps showing the ice-free continent, secret expeditions led by powerful nations, geometric structures found by ice-penetrating radar, and of course, silence. Perhaps the biggest sign that there is something there that is not to be found so easily. When there is so much effort to hide, limit access, and control research, the least we can do is question it. Question everything. And that's exactly what we're going to do now. Let's investigate this extraordinary possibility. The idea that Antarctica may hold the keys to our true origin. Perhaps it hides evidence of advanced ancient civilizations. Perhaps it embraces impossible fossils, gigantic structures, unknown symbols. Or maybe it will reveal a story we've never been told. A story buried in the deepest ice, waiting just for the right moment to surface. But before unlocking this mystery, we need to understand something crucial. Why is this continent so protected, so investigated, and at the same time so silent? And it is precisely here that the next part of our journey begins, where discoveries stop being coincidences and start to form an unsettling pattern, a pattern that can reveal something much bigger than we imagine. And before we get to the deepest part of this mystery, the one that really starts to connect all the pieces, I need to know one very important thing. What do you think of all this? Because each theory, each hypothesis, and each discovery only makes sense when there is an entire community debating, reflecting, and raising points that often go unnoticed. So comment below what you believe Antarctica really hides. Do you really think that there could be the lost key to human origin? Or do you believe that all this is just coincidence, exaggeration, or lack of conclusive answers? Your opinion is fundamental, because it is what builds this dialogue, and it is through it that I can bring content that is increasingly complete, deeper, and more connected to what you really want to discover. And take the opportunity to leave your like, because this shows YouTube that this type of content is important, that it has value, and that it deserves to be delivered to more people who are also looking for answers to questions that science often avoids asking. Your like makes a real difference. It is not just a symbolic gesture, and it literally helps this video reach more curious people, more people who think outside the box, and more people who, like you, feel that there is something much bigger behind these mysteries. And of course, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, now is the perfect time to subscribe. This is because in the next chapters of this video, and in the next content to come, We will delve deeper into concepts, reveal little publicized studies, and open up theories that may have never been explored in this way. And you don't want to miss any of it. Each piece of information that follows is essential to understand the real dimension of this enigma. So sign up, activate the bell, and get ready, because what's coming will make everything even more intriguing. The point is simple. The more you interact, the more this video becomes a space for debates, discoveries, and reflections that go far beyond entertainment. Here, we think, question and reconstruct everything that we thought was absolute truth. And understanding this content is crucial, because from now on, the layers of mystery begin to deepen. Let's explore data that few know about, cross-reference information that is usually never put side by side, and put together a line of reasoning that can really transform the way you see Antarctica, and maybe even the way you see humanity itself. So comment, like, subscribe, and come with me to the next part, because now we begin to descend beyond the surface, beyond the ice, into a territory where the questions become more intense, the evidence more disturbing, and the possibilities simply impossible to ignore. From the moment you start looking at Antarctica not just as a huge block of ice, but as a potential natural archive of humanity's hidden history, something changes within our perception. The continent begins to take on a kind of silent life, as if each layer of ice were a hidden chapter in a forbidden book, a book we may never have been allowed to read. And it is exactly at this point that the central question, what if Antarctica holds the keys to the true human origin, stops sounding like speculation and starts to seem like an uncomfortably plausible possibility, because the more we investigate, the more we realize that there is an almost strategic insistence on keeping this place isolated, inaccessible, surrounded by international rules that do not exist in any other territory on the planet. And that, in itself, should make any remotely curious person stop and reflect. When scientists claim that Antarctic ice preserves data and structures that may be millions of years old, they are not exaggerating. Antarctica functions as a geological level vault, a vault that literally freezes time. There, fragments of the past remain intact, while the rest of the world changes, transforms, erodes. Imagine how many clues about our ancestry, about unknown species, about lost cultures, or even about cataclysmic events are buried under miles of ice. Imagine how many answers have yet to be revealed because we simply don't have access to the right places. And now think, why don't we have this access? It is at this moment that old reports, historical documents, impossible maps, and military expeditions that are little commented on come into play. Maps like the famous Peary Race, which show Antarctica without ice, something that would have been impossible with the technology of the time, leave the feeling that someone long before us knew that region. And he didn't just know, he explored, recorded, and possibly inhabited parts of it. This causes immediate discomfort because it challenges the traditional scientific narrative. And whenever something challenges the dominant narrative, it's either denied or it's silenced or it's simply written off as irrelevant. But you can no longer ignore it when the number of signals starts to accumulate. There are also underground caves with temperatures above 20 degrees Celsius, true natural corridors that could support life, plant, animal, and even primordial civilizations. It's hard not to imagine the possibility that humans, or something similar to us, lived there before the global freeze. And we're not just talking about ice and rocks. We are talking about symmetrical structures detected by radar, patterns that do not look natural, and reports from researchers who claim to have seen formations that resemble entrances, tunnels, pillars, always surrounded by secrecy, restrictions, and logistical accidents. The deeper we delve, the clearer it becomes that Antarctica is not just a white dot on the map. It is a forbidden frontier where science, history, and mystery meet. And while this is fascinating, it is also disturbing. Because if there is something there that reveals our origin, that means that human history can be much older and more complex than we imagine. Perhaps it involves advanced civilizations that have disappeared. Perhaps it involves unknown evolutionary adaptations. It may even involve knowledge that has been deliberately erased. And this all starts to come together when we think about the absurd number of nations that have signed treaties to prevent any significant exploration. It's curious, isn't it? All countries, even historical rivals, agreeing not to touch Antarctica. Doesn't that sound strange to you? That's why we need to look at this continent with different eyes, with an open mind and a willingness to connect dots that, at first glance, don't seem to make sense. Antarctica may be the missing link between what we know and what has always been hidden from us. And as we continue this investigation, we open space for even deeper hypotheses, some that defy logic, others that expand our understanding of the past, and some that may even explain gaps in our own evolution. But before I move on to this next part, I want to know what you think about all of this. Comment below if you believe that Antarctica hides something related to true human origins. If you want to strengthen engagement even further, write the phrase, "Ice hides more than it seems," or just comment, "I want the next part," so I know that you are here with me in this investigation. And leave a like, because this shows YouTube that this content deserves to be delivered to more people looking for answers like you. If you're not already subscribed, sign up now so you don't miss the sequel, because what comes next will delve deeper into this mystery in a way you may never have considered. And when we start to see Antarctica as this possible link between a forgotten past and our own existence, everything that was considered absurd or crazy theory starts to have a different weight. Because if there is a continent capable of freezing time, storing entire histories and keeping intact traces that anywhere else would have been destroyed by erosion, climate, or even human action, that continent is precisely Antarctica. And this is where curiosity becomes almost a necessity. The need to understand what is hidden, what is being protected, and most importantly, what is being avoided. With each new discovery, with each new record, Antarctica stops being a white void and becomes something similar to a portal to a past that is perhaps very different from the one we learn about in history books. And this feeling grows even more when we think about the enormous underground structures that have been detected by modern technologies. Many of them have perfect angles, geometric patterns, and alignments that are completely unnatural. It is impossible to look at this data and not question whether we are really just looking at geological formations, or if we are looking at the remains of something built, something very old, very advanced, and, for some extremely important reason, ended up being swallowed by time and ice. And the more you delve into this possibility, the more you begin to realize that the coincidences are too numerous to be just coincidences. It's not just the existence of these structures. It is the combination of them with old maps, reports from explorers who claim to have seen lights, shadows, and even gigantic entrances in ice walls. It is the insistence of governments on keeping certain regions completely closed. It's the fact that many studies are stopped without explanation. It is the constant presence of military bases in a place where, theoretically, only scientific research should exist. And it's mostly the global silence about all this, a silence that seems carefully constructed, as if there is an invisible agreement that only very specific parts of Antarctica are shown to the world, while others remain inaccessible. And when you put all this together, a feeling is born that is difficult to ignore. The feeling that we are being kept away from something that could change everything. Perhaps Antarctica really is one of the most important places on the planet when it comes to understanding human origins. Perhaps it contains traces of a prehistoric civilization so advanced that it simply wouldn't fit into the traditional timeline. Perhaps there is evidence that humanity did not just evolve linearly, but that there were breaks, restarts, catastrophes, erasures. Perhaps there are signs that we were not always alone. And the fact that Antarctica is one of the few places where the past has literally been frozen makes it the perfect setting to keep these secrets. And all of this raises another essential question. If there is something there that could rewrite our history, why haven't we had access to this information yet? Why so many barriers, treaties, limits, and prohibited zones? After all, an entire continent closed to the public, untouched by human populations for millions of years, should be a natural laboratory for knowledge. But it's not treated like that. It is treated as sensitive territory, as something that needs constant monitoring, as if it were guarding not just ice, but dangerous memories. Memories that could reveal truths too uncomfortable to release. And when we think about how humanity reacts to discoveries that challenge the official narrative, it all starts to make sense. How many times in history do we find something that just doesn't fit? How many impossible artifacts? How many anomalous fossils? How many ruins that seem too advanced for the eras to which they belong? All of this always ends up being discarded, underestimated, or treated as an error. But what if they are not errors? What if they are fragments of a reality that insists on emerging despite attempts to bury it? Antarctica then becomes the perfect setting to store these pieces of the puzzle that no one wants to put together. And the most fascinating thing is that none of this needs to be fantasy. Just look at the logic. If there is a place capable of preserving entire civilizations under layers of ice, it is Antarctica. If there is an environment where ancient ruins could survive for eons, this is it. If there is a place with the potential to reveal a completely new or completely forgotten chapter of human history, it is before our eyes, silent, intact, frozen, and, at the same time, inaccessible. Almost as if he was waiting for the right moment to reveal everything. And before we move on to an even deeper part of this investigation, where theories begin to come together with even more intriguing evidence, I want to know if you're following this line of reasoning. Comment below the phrase, "I want to find out what's under the ice," or if you prefer, just write "continue," because this shows me that you are here with me, piece by piece, helping to put together this puzzle that could reveal something incredibly bigger than we imagine. And of course, leave your like and subscribe so you don't miss the next part, because this is when the mystery really starts to take shape. And it is exactly at this point that the investigation begins to take an unexpected turn, almost as if each new piece found, each new piece of information analyzed, pulls us even deeper into this dense mystery that surrounds Antarctica. Because when we look at the absurd amount of data that fits together almost perfectly, impossible maps, geometric structures, hot caves, restricted zones, international silence, we realize that we are not just following a geographic enigma, but perhaps an existential enigma. As if Antarctica is trying to show us something, almost whispering through the ice, waiting for someone to finally connect it all. And when you look at this continent through that lens, like a frozen archive of human history, everything starts to take on a much greater weight. Because if there really is something there that can rewrite our origins, it means that reports of advanced prehistoric civilizations may not just be myths or exaggerations. It means that theories such as lost cultures, peoples who disappeared without a trace, and knowledge that seemed to appear out of nowhere throughout history, may have a real basis, and Antarctica becomes the perfect setting to house this hidden past. After all, it is very strange that an entire continent is so little explored, so limited, so protected by such strict international laws. The number of areas completely off limits to civilians is frightening. We're not just talking about dangerous places. We're talking about zones where you can't enter, fly over, record, search, or even officially mention. It's like there are secrets buried there that the world isn't ready to see. And this makes each new discovery even more valuable, because it breaks layers of silence and reveals fragments of a past that tries to remain hidden. And this is where a fundamental point comes in. Antarctica is not a simple random block of ice. It is the only continent that holds a type of ice so old and so deep that it could contain not just fossils, but entire frozen records of eras that completely disappear from our official history. Layers that come from times where humanity shouldn't even exist. Layers that can store impressions, sediments, artifacts, and even buildings that tell a story completely different from the traditional narrative. And this naturally generates discomfort, because anything that challenges a consolidated narrative is automatically seen as a threat. But the question that always comes up is, why do so many governments come together to keep this territory inaccessible? If it were just a cold and dangerous place, there would be no need for secrecy. There would be no meticulously organized treaty. There would be no resistance to any type of in-depth study outside of official control. And when governments work together like this, especially those that never agree on anything, we know something big is being hidden. Something that is probably not just related to fragile ecosystems or environmental preservation, but rather information that could completely change everything we believe about the human past. And the most curious thing is that even the few research studies released are extremely selective. They always show the same regions, the same safe points, the same areas that pose no risk to the established narrative. You never see in-depth studies of the most enigmatic zones, where temperatures beneath the ice defy logic, where radar captures shapes that are too perfect, or where signs of ancient structures appear and disappear in unexplained reports. It's as if someone is choosing what can and cannot be shown. And if we stop to think calmly, isn't it strange that a place so relevant to understanding the planet is treated as a kind of global vault? A safe where every key is carefully guarded by international forces, away from the public eye? Perhaps Antarctica is exactly that. A vault of ancestral knowledge, guarded for millennia by ice and protected in recent centuries by world politics. And if this vault really holds secrets about human origins, then it makes sense that its existence is controlled with such absolute rigor. And the deeper we delve into this reasoning, the clearer it becomes that we are looking at the tip of something much bigger. Perhaps Antarctica is not just an archive of the past, but an essential piece of a giant puzzle that we have never been allowed to put together. A piece that, if fitted, completely changes the final design. And it is precisely now, at this moment when we are about to get into the deeper theories about what could really be buried there, that I need to know if you are with me in this investigation. If so, comment below on the phrase, "Ice keeps answers," or simply, "I'm following everything." Leave a like and subscribe, because the next part will delve even deeper into what is perhaps the greatest secret in human history, and you won't want to miss what comes next. And when we start to see Antarctica as this absolute vault of ancient memory, holding answers that may have never been revealed to the modern world, there is no way to ignore the feeling that we are getting close to something really big. Something that, piece by piece, is forming a mosaic that not only challenges the traditional narrative of human history, but also opens the door to bold, unexpected, and, at the same time, incredibly coherent hypotheses. Because if there is a place where humanity could have left ancestral marks of a completely erased or forgotten era, that place would not be a tropical forest or a hot desert. It would be precisely a place where time freezes, literally freezes, everything it touches. And this natural function of Antarctica makes the continent the perfect setting for recording lost civilizations, ancient cataclysms, or even logic-defying evolutionary experiments. And the more we reflect on this, the more we realize that one of the most intriguing theories is precisely that the continent may have been home to human groups before the total freeze. That wouldn't be impossible. On the contrary, if Antarctica was once covered in forests, rivers, and fauna, then it could also have been home to intelligent species, cultures, villages, primitive cities, or even societies far more advanced than we imagine. And thinking about this makes us face an essential point. How many civilizations have disappeared without leaving a trace? How many ancient cultures were buried, swallowed, wiped off the map by geological events that simply demolished everything? And if this happened in so many parts of the world, why wouldn't it have happened even before recorded history? Why couldn't it have happened in Antarctica? And here comes an even more disturbing, but extremely logical idea. If prehistoric or even pre-glacial societies really existed there, their buildings, artifacts, and forms of life would be preserved as time capsules. They would not have been eroded by wind, rain, erosion, or wars. They would have been frozen, sealed, buried under gigantic layers of ice. And this type of preservation makes Antarctica possibly the only place on Earth where history may have survived intact for millions of years. This means that ruins, fossils, ancient technology, tools, structures, or even bodies could be there, sleeping beneath the deep ice, just waiting to be discovered. The ones that science, or someone with an open mind, finally discovers. And precisely for this reason, the supposed geometric formations found there attract so much attention. They appear in alignments too perfect to be natural. Many are symmetrical, others are too straight, others appear to form 90-degree angles, as if they were ancient entrances or portals. All of this makes Antarctica have enormous weight when we think about lost civilizations, or even histories that have been erased. These are details that do not match an empty continent. These are brands that seem to echo something intentional, something built, something that, for some reason, was swallowed by ice and turned into a secret. And when we think about lost civilizations, we're not necessarily talking about cities like the ones we know. Perhaps they were societies more harmonized with their environment. Perhaps they were advanced nomadic groups. Perhaps they were collectives that developed skills or knowledge that today we would consider extraordinary. There is no rule for what an ancient civilization needs to be. Archaeology has already proven that several extremely developed cultures emerged, flourished, and disappeared without leaving almost anything but ruins. So why couldn't this have happened in Antarctica, a place that, before freezing, could have supported abundant life? And the most interesting thing about this reflection is the way in which this mystery always seems to escape the public eye. There are always stories of expeditions that found something unexpected. There are always reports of structures that simply shouldn't be there. There are always fragments that seem to suggest that there is much more than we imagine, but at the same time, we hardly have access to anything concrete. This further fuels the idea that there is a layer of protection, or perhaps a layer of concealment, that prevents this information from being released to the world. As if opening this ice vault were too dangerous, too revolutionary, too transformative. And when you think about it, the inevitable question arises. If Antarctica really hides ancient ruins, lost civilizations, or any evidence of true human origins, What impact would this have on modern society? What would be the impact on science, history, religion, geopolitics? This is why perhaps there is so much resistance. Revealing information like this could destabilize a lot of things. I could rewrite books, question authorities, change entire paradigms. And that's why this mystery is so fascinating, because it involves not just ice and rocks, but the very structure of what we call knowledge. And all of this leads us directly to the next phase of this journey, where we explore exactly what these possible civilizations could have left behind, and how it might connect with ancient myths, lost accounts, and stories that have passed through thousands of years like whispers. But before moving on to this part, comment below on the phrase, "I want to discover the hidden past," or just "Secret Antarctica." This shows me that you are with me this far in this deep investigation. And of course, leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next stage, because the next revelations will take this mystery to an even more intense level. And when we begin to imagine which civilizations could have inhabited a continent so isolated, so mysterious, and so strategically protected by nature itself, it is difficult not to feel that we are approaching an answer that may be greater than any popular theory. Because if there really were people living there before the freeze, that means we're looking at an entire chapter of human history that has been erased not just by time, but by forces we may not even know about. And it is precisely this feeling of emptiness, of silence, of gap, that makes Antarctica one of the most intriguing places on the planet. A territory that seems to reject simple explanations, as if it were guarding its own truth. A deep, ancestral, and perhaps dangerous truth for those who try to reveal it. And as we delve deeper into this reasoning, we begin to notice something even more curious. Several cultures around the world, cultures that have never had contact with each other, carry very similar myths about an ancient, wise, advanced people who disappeared after a great cataclysm. Whether in Greek, Egyptian, Sumerian, Hindu mythology, or even in indigenous legends, there is always this figure of a lost civilization that dominated knowledge far beyond its time. What if some of these stories originate from real events? What if what we call mythology is actually the distorted memory of something that really happened, perhaps in a place where ice held everything? This kind of connection always seems coincidental until we start putting the pieces together. And when we analyze ancient reports, mysterious structures iOS spread across the planet, and the existence of places that seem to hide deep secrets, Antarctica emerges as the meeting point for these narratives. A perfect place to house a civilization that suddenly disappeared, but left traces spread across the world. Traces such as repeated symbols, inexplicable architectural scales, advanced astronomical knowledge, and even construction techniques that, even today, challenge modern engineers. And if this civilization, whatever it may be, really existed, it is logical to imagine that part of its history, part of its culture, and part of its very identity is still preserved beneath the ice sheets of Antarctica. There is no other place on the planet with such perfect conditions for absolute preservation. It's almost as if the continent was chosen, or perhaps designated by nature itself, to guard these secrets until humanity is ready to rediscover them. And this idea raises a series of uncomfortable questions, because they touch on something primordial: our need to understand where we came from, who we were, and who we can be. And when we reflect on this possibility, we inevitably think about the impact that all this would have on the world today. Imagine if we suddenly found irrefutable evidence of an advanced civilization that lived tens of thousands of years ago, much earlier than science considers possible. Imagine ruins that show unexpected technologies, writings that would completely change our theories about evolution, fossils that contradict everything we have learned. This would shake structures, beliefs, curricula, institutions. This would question the past, but it would also redesign the future. And that is precisely why so much seems to be kept silent. The deeper we delve into the mystery of Antarctica, the more we realize that the coincidences are too sophisticated to be just coincidences. As if something, be it geography, history, or even a deliberate choice of forces we don't understand, had transformed this continent into the silent guardian of human origins. And it's not just the idea of an ancient civilization that makes this thought-provoking. It's the fact that, even today, despite all the technology, satellites, drones, and research, Antarctica continues to refuse to reveal its deepest secrets, as if the ice were alive, as if it were protecting something that doesn't want to be revealed so easily. And here comes a point that I always like to reinforce. If there is a place in the world where fundamental answers about human existence may be hidden, that place is Antarctica. If there is an environment capable of preserving artifacts from forgotten eras, it is under that ice. If there is a scenario where past and present meet on a fine line, where science tries to reach the unknown, that scenario is there, silent, isolated, intact. And each new theory, each new discovery, and each new suspicion only strengthens the feeling that we are approaching something monumental. And right now, as we delve deeper into this conception that Antarctica may have been the cradle, the refuge, or the tomb of a lost civilization, we are going to enter into an even more surprising part: the analysis of the signs that indicate that what is buried under the ice may not just be archaeological remains, but rather something that directly connects our evolution with phenomena that current science still cannot completely explain. But before we move on to this deeper layer, comment below, "I want to know what comes next," or just, "The ice holds everything," because this shows that you are with me in this investigation. And of course, like and subscribe, because the next chapter will expand this mystery to a level that could completely change the way you see human history. And it is precisely at this moment, when we begin to consider that Antarctica is perhaps not just a natural repository of frozen history, but a code, a perfectly preserved message, that theories about what is really buried there gain almost inevitable strength. Because if there is one place where the past can survive intact for millions of years, it is that silent continent at the edge of the planet. And the feeling that we are on the edge of something gigantic becomes even stronger when we look at the evidence that suggests that what lies beneath the ice is not just the work of nature, but perhaps the work of intelligent hands, human hands, or perhaps something beyond that. And the fascinating thing is that the deeper we delve, the clearer it becomes that Antarctica seems to act like a guardian that preserves secrets that could rewrite everything we think we know about evolution, civilization, and human origins themselves. And this is where one theory starts to stand out among all the others: the idea that the ice isn't just hiding ruins or civilization, lost actions, but rather the link that connects global events that shaped humanity as we know it. Think about this for a moment. Great cataclysms, abrupt climate changes, mysterious extinctions, inexplicable advances in ancient history. All of this seems to happen in cycles, as if it were part of a pattern that we are unaware of. What if Antarctica is precisely the point of origin of these cycles? What if the frozen continent holds not just physical remains, but records, traces, of events that transform the planet again and again? This would explain why so many cultures around the world have similar stories about a previous age, a golden age that ended tragically, almost always described as the result of a flood, a freeze, a global collapse. Civilizations such as Egypt, Sumer, ancient India, the Mayans, and many others carry myths from a world before ours. What if this previous world was precisely Antarctica before the ice? What if the disappearance of this possible pre-glacial civilization was the event that gave rise to all these narratives spread across the planet? This possibility ceases to be absurd when we remember that the continent was once warm, green, and fertile, exactly the type of environment where a culture could flourish, expand, and leave deep marks. And as we follow this reasoning, one point begins to gain prominence. If there really was a civilization there, it would not have been destroyed by climate alone. Something much bigger must have happened to freeze an entire continent so quickly as to seal everything there forever. And this is where theories come in about abrupt changes in the Earth's axis, global impacts, massive eruptions, or even astrophysical phenomena that could have transformed the planet in a matter of days or weeks. Events so extreme that our modern history has only recorded it through myths. And Antarctica, being the epicenter of this transformation, would be the only place capable of preserving clues of this colossal turnaround. And when we think about how deep ice works, we realize that it's not just possible, it's extremely plausible. Ice layers accumulate and record everything: particles, sediments, structures, artifacts, microorganisms, fossils, construction remains. All of this could be there, stored like pages of a book that until today, no one has been able to open completely. And modern science has already found signs of steep temperature curves, explosive climate change, and even strange particles that don't match any traditional explanation. It's as if the planet has experienced something we still don't fully understand. Something so big that it left its mark on the ice, the atmosphere, and perhaps our ancestors. And here comes an essential point that few people tend to consider. If there really was an ancient and advanced civilization in Antarctica, and if it disappeared due to a global event, it is very likely that the survivors migrated to other continents, taking with them only fragments of their knowledge. Fragments that became myths, legends, symbols, fragments that influenced other cultures, that taught mathematics, astronomy, agriculture, architecture. And these scattered fragments could be precisely the basis of so many coincidences that we find in the ancient world. Gigantic structures, precise astronomical alignments, similar stories about gods who came from the ice or from the extreme south. What if all of this is connected? What if this pattern repeated by so many civilizations is actually the fading memory of a single monumental event? Antarctica, then, would not just be a frozen continent, but the point of origin of part of human history that has never been told to us. And each piece we analyze, each theory we investigate, seems to bring us closer and closer to this idea. As if we are, little by little, tearing away the layers of symbolic ice that cover our own identity. And now, as we prepare to enter the next part of this investigation, the one in which we explore the most shocking, most controversial, and hardest to ignore evidence, I want to know if you're really following this line of reasoning. If so, comment below on the phrase, "I want to discover Antarctica," or simply, "Ice has memory." It shows me that you are with me on this journey. And of course, leave your like and subscribe, because what comes next could be the most revealing part of this whole story. And just when we begin to realize that all these patterns, all these repeated reports, and all these accidental coincidences seem to point to a single point, Antarctica, it is impossible not to wonder what is really hidden beneath those sheets of ancient ice. Because the more we analyze it, the more it appears that the ice is not just preserving physical remains, but perhaps serving information that was left there intentionally. As if this frozen continent were a kind of vault built by nature itself, capable of resisting time, wars, ice ages, and even human action. And this leads us to a question that few have the courage to ask openly. If there is something down there that could redefine our history, has this information already been found by someone before us? And this question becomes even more disturbing when we remember that several historic expeditions have reported unexplained events in Antarctica. Some explorers talk about shadows moving across the horizon, others mention walls too smooth to be natural formations, and some describe regions that seem to emit heat, even in the middle of the frozen desert. Not to mention the cases of expeditions that mysteriously disappeared, military operations that were never explained, and reports that simply disappeared from official records. All of this puts a layer of suspicion around the continent, as if there is something there that shouldn't be discovered anytime soon, or shouldn't be discovered by anyone. And when you couple that with the existence of structures similar to those we see elsewhere in the world, pyramids, alignments, triangular formations, and geometric patterns, it starts to look like Antarctica may not only be home to lost civilizations, but also connections to ancient cultures spread across the planet. Imagine for a moment that ancient ruins, similar to those found in Egypt, Mesopotamia, South America, or Africa, are buried there, perfectly preserved by ice. This would explain why so many cultures have such similar myths. Perhaps they shared a common origin, a central point, an ancestral nucleus that was lost after the continent's sudden freezing. And the more you think about it, the more it makes sense. Deep ice has the ability to seal anything: tools, temples, bodies, artifacts, inscriptions, fossils. And if all of this really exists there, that means we still have no idea how far back our history goes. It means that human evolution may not have been linear. It means that primitive knowledge may have had several phases, some giant advances, followed by great falls. It means that everything we study about the past may be just a fragment of a much larger cycle that involves successive rises and collapses of humanity. And this idea fits perfectly with reports of extreme climate change recorded in the ice. There are signs of gigantic changes in temperature that occurred abruptly, as if something massive had happened on the planet in a ridiculously short interval. These records indicate not only sudden freezes, but also unexpected thaws, movements in the Earth's axis, magnetic changes, and even cosmic particles that do not match common explanations. All of this together suggests that Antarctica was the scene, or direct consequence, of global events that radically changed life on Earth. And if this event destroyed an ancient civilization there, it makes sense that the survivors would have migrated to regions where they could continue living, taking with them fragments of lost knowledge. And perhaps that is why so many ancient cultures emerged out of nowhere, with extremely sophisticated advances in astronomy, architecture, and mathematics, as if they had inherited this knowledge from a central point. And if that central point really existed, it is now buried under miles of ice, untouched, protected, and waiting for the moment when it will finally be revealed. And here comes another question that many avoid. If there is something there that could change the history of humanity, who would be interested in keeping it secret? Governments, institutions, scientific groups? The fact is that there are areas in Antarctica where not even researchers are allowed to enter. There are entire areas where air access is prohibited, where official maps are constantly changing, and where any attempt to approach is blocked. None of this would make sense if it was just cold, uninhabited territory. These levels of protection reveal that there is something there that cannot, or should not, be found easily. And now, as we approach the deepest, most surprising part of this mystery, the one where we begin to consider not just lost civilizations, but possibilities that go far beyond traditional explanations. I need to know if you're with me this far. Comment on the phrase, "The ice hasn't told you everything yet," or "I want the next part," because this shows me that you are following every detail of this journey. And of course, leave a like and subscribe, because what comes now will elevate this mystery to a level you may never have imagined. And now, after all this construction, after so many pieces, the scattered ones that begin to form a pattern that is almost impossible to ignore, we reach the point where the questions stop being just speculations and start to become direct provocations to our understanding of what it means to exist as humanity. Because if there is something buried beneath the deep ice sheets of Antarctica that could reveal not just who we were, but why we became what we are today, it means that for centuries we have lived with an extremely limited view of our true history. And it is precisely this limitation that begins to dissolve when we see Antarctica as more than a frozen continent, but as a purposeful vault, an intentional deposit of ancestral memories, protected to the extreme. And when we think about the idea of purpose, we inevitably enter even more delicate territory. That perhaps Antarctica does not just hold ruins, fossils, or artifacts, but a kind of code, a message left by those who came before us. Not a message written on stones or papyrus, but a message hidden in the very structure of the continent, in the ice, in the geology, in the symmetry of underground forms, in the patterns that are repeated in different parts of the world. It's as if there were a silent secret there, a secret that only those who are willing to look deeply, without fear, without prejudice, without mental prisons, will be able to decipher. And as we move along this line of reasoning, we begin to understand why so many narratives throughout human history always seem to point to an earlier period, a time when the gods walked the earth, when humanity received knowledge from advanced beings, when wisdom came from the south, from the extreme south. It may seem like just an allegory, but when we remember that Antarctica was once a hot, fertile continent with rivers, vegetation, and possibly inhabitants, these stories begin to gain a new layer of meaning. We're not just talking about myths. We are talking about memories transformed into mythologies, about generations repeating distorted versions of something that really happened. And so, when we look at human evolution from this point of view, we realize that there are huge gaps, sudden evolutionary leaps, abilities that emerged without clear explanation, knowledge that flourished in times where that simply shouldn't have been possible. And science, however modern it may be, still struggles to explain many of these leaps. Did they really come out of nowhere? Or did they come from some point of origin that we haven't yet had access to? A frozen, isolated, forbidden point of origin, surrounded by silence, exactly like Antarctica. And if, in some way, our evolution is directly connected to what happened on that continent, whether through migrations, survivors, teachings, conflicts, or even interactions that we can't even accurately classify, that means the ice is not just preserving the past, but preserving the key to our own cultural DNA. This is extremely powerful because it opens up a theory that few have the courage to discuss. What if we are not the first advanced civilization on Earth? What if there were others before us, others who reached such high technological, social, or spiritual levels that they ended up being erased by some catastrophic global event? What if your last traces are right under the ice, waiting to be revealed at the right moment? And when we think about the right time, it is impossible to ignore that. We are living in an era in which technology finally allows us to see things that were previously invisible. high-precision satellites, ice-penetrating radars, drones capable of mapping impossible regions, artificial intelligence analyzing patterns that human eyes would never perceive. And that means we're getting dangerously close to discovering something that has perhaps been hidden for millennia. Something that, if it came to light unexpectedly, could radically transform our worldview. And perhaps that's why so many restrictions continue to exist. Perhaps the goal is to delay, control, or manipulate the timing of this revelation. And here begins an even more intriguing part: the possibility that modern reports from scientists, military personnel, researchers have found clearer clues than we imagine. Reports that speak of huge structures as if they were cities covered in ice. Reports of tunnels with walls too smooth to be the work of nature. Reports of metallic objects buried kilometers underground. Reports of heated cavities that could harbor life to this day. None of this appears in headlines. None of it is discussed openly. None of it is confirmed. And that's exactly why it's so suspicious. When there is too much silence, when there is too much care, when there is too much restriction, it is generally because there is something too big to be revealed. And this is where you and I need to make a conscious effort to keep an open mind. Because perhaps, in a few years, or perhaps even well before then, the ice will begin to give way, revealing parts of Antarctica that have been hidden for tens of thousands of years. Perhaps ruins will begin to emerge. Maybe artifacts will start to be found. Perhaps caves bury complete stories that will turn the academic world upside down. And when that happens, because one way or another it will happen, you will remember this exact moment, this investigation, this journey that began as curiosity and now turns into a deep dive into what is perhaps humanity's greatest secret. And before we move on to the next part, where we will explore the gigantic consequences that a discovery of this type would cause in the modern world, comment below, "I want to know the impact," or just, "The truth is on the ice." Your comment really helps with engagement and shows me that you are with me until the end of this investigation. And of course, leave your like and subscribe, because now we're about to get into the most explosive part of this theory. And now that we have reached the edge of this investigation, with each symbolic layer of ice being slowly removed, we begin to realize that Antarctica represents something much larger than a simple frozen continent. It becomes a silent mirror that reflects everything we still don't understand about ourselves, our origins, and the path we've followed over thousands of years. Because if there really is something buried there, be it a lost civilization, be it an essential fragment of our history, be it a record that has escaped the hands of time, it means that we live in an incomplete narrative, perhaps even edited, perhaps even purposely protected to prevent certain truths from surfacing prematurely. And this feeling that there is something bigger than we can see affects the mind, affects the imagination, and affects the human desire to discover one's own essence. And when we think about the consequences of a possible revelation, it is impossible not to feel an almost immediate impact. Imagine if, for some reason, the ice began to melt more intensely and giant structures appeared on the surface. Imagine if a team of researchers found inscriptions, symbols, artifacts, or even something even more impressive, like a perfectly preserved body of someone who lived there thousands of years ago. Imagine if this body showed human characteristics, but with traits that do not fit into any known species. How would the world react? How would science react? How would institutions react? This would create tidal waves in all areas: cultural, religious, archaeological, political, technological. And precisely for this reason, perhaps, there is so much silence around Antarctica. Because discovering something on this level would force the entire world to reevaluate everything we believe to be true. It would force old schools, theses, theories, and explanations to be rewritten. It would force deep debates about how humanity really evolved, about who we were before what we call the beginning of civilization, and about the cycles we may have already lived through and forgotten. And when I mention cycles, I'm not just talking about ice ages or geological movements. I speak of human cycles, rises, falls, golden ages, eras of collapse. Because if we were able to build advanced societies in the remote past, this means that perhaps we are just repeating an ancient pattern, a pattern that left marks across the planet, but whose final answers may lie precisely under the ice of Antarctica. And this thought leads us to something even deeper. What if Antarctica is not just a record of the past, but a warning for the future? What if what is buried there is not just history, but a sign? Something left so that future civilizations, including us, Don't make the same mistakes. Something preserved for millions of years so that at the right time, it could be found again. This possibility may seem too philosophical for some, but it fits perfectly into myths, ancient texts, and mysterious accounts that speak of lost eras and continents that disappeared after great cataclysms. What if this disappearance was not just a tragedy, but a way of preserving knowledge? What if what's in the ice is the final echo of a civilization that knew its end was near? This type of reflection opens enormous doors. Because we are no longer questioning just what is down there, but why it exists there. And that changes everything. Suddenly, Antarctica stops being seen as a natural prison and starts to be seen as a time capsule, perhaps even as a shelter built with the help of nature itself, a place where the past can sleep safe until humanity was ready or curious enough to seek it out. And perhaps now, right now, with our modern technology, with our ability to map the invisible, with our obsession with understanding what came before, perhaps we are reaching the point where the continent begins to allow fragments of its secret to surface. And if that really happens, the whole world will change. Certain borders will no longer make sense. Certain explanations will need to be revised. Certain beliefs will be shaken. Antarctica could be the trigger for a gigantic transformation, not just in technology or science, but in the way we see human existence as a whole. Because understanding who we were profoundly changes who we think we are, and especially who we can be from now on. And when we think about it, it becomes clear that this revelation would not be small. It would be monumental. It would be one of those rare moments when humanity looks in the mirror and finally sees something it has never seen before. And now, as we prepare to end this journey, not with definitive answers, but with even bigger questions, I need to know if you're really with me this far. If you felt each layer of this investigation, if you saw the frozen continent in a completely different way, if you understand the size of this mystery. So comment below on the phrase, Antarctica keeps the truth. Or if you want something more direct, comment, I want the final revelation. This shows me that you have walked with me through all these steps and that you are ready to continue exploring these deep mysteries of humanity. And of course, like and subscribe, because there are still many secrets that the world tries to hide. And I'm here to reveal each of them with you. And while all these questions echo in our minds, Antarctica remains there, silent, unshakable, as if it were watching humanity's every step without ever completely revealing what it hides. Perhaps that's exactly what makes this mystery so powerful. It doesn't give away easily. He provokes, he instigates, he opens doors in our consciousness that would never be opened otherwise. And deep down, perhaps that is the true function of such a monumental secret, not just to be discovered, but to transform those who have the courage to seek it. Because at the end of the day, Antarctica is more than ice, more than a continent, more than a white mass at the edge of the map. She is a reminder that there are buried stories, hidden truths, forgotten civilizations, and entire chapters of humanity that have yet to be read. She is living proof that the world still holds deep mysteries, and that not everything has been explained, cataloged, or understood. And that, instead of scaring us, should inspire us. It should push us towards curiosity, towards questioning, towards the constant search for what goes beyond the surface. And if there's anything we've learned on this journey, it's that the search for the unknown says much more about us than about the secret itself. It is in the act of searching that we discover who we really are. It is in investigation that we reveal our essence. And by looking at Antarctica as this portal to the past, perhaps even the future, we realize that the question is not just what's there. The real question is, are we ready to find out? Are we prepared to accept what may be revealed? And even if this mystery remains buried for another century, for another 1,000 years, or even forever, the simple fact that you are here, questioning, reflecting, and connecting each part of this enigma already puts you far ahead of most. You are part of the small portion of humanity that does not accept easy answers, that does not conform to official versions, that feels that there is something greater beyond appearances. And that, honestly, is already extraordinary. If you've made it this far, it's because you're truly part of that small group that seeks answers beyond the surface. So I want to ask you something important. Subscribe to the channel now, because whoever stays until the end of my videos is exactly the type of person I want to have with me in the next investigations, the next mysteries, and the next revelations. And since you stayed until the end, I want you to comment below on the sentence, I went to the final ice. This is the secret code for me to know who really followed everything, who participated in the complete experience, and who is ready to go even deeper in the next videos. Also, take advantage and leave your like, because this shows YouTube that you are part of those who value this type of deep, mysterious content and full of questions that the world avoids asking. And before leaving, do the following. Now click on the next video that appears on your screen. There is another mystery as big as this one, maybe even bigger, and I'm sure you won't want to miss it. See you there.